Hello, my name is Bogdan Groza. Thank you for having me and thank you for being here. With this video, I will present a movie entitled Waterworld. The first half of this video I will dedicate to analyze and talk about some of its themes, eventually share even one or two scenes, and the second half I would rather explore what lies in the depths, not only in the world that the movie creates, but also in the waters that it presents. Now you see, Waterworld is acclaimedly one of Hollywood's biggest flops. It invested a huge sum of money in the making, and it received not that much at the box office. It came out in 1995, and while it does present some inconsistencies here and there, which I will analyze briefly, it does put emphasis on some themes that probably and hopefully today would be received better and would be more regarded. You see, in the Anthropocene, the era that we are currently living in, the repercussions of the ecological shifts on a global scale are frequently explored, especially within literature and within other media, such as films. And in my opinion, Waterworld did exactly this. So, without further ado, let us dive into this movie and understand what are those themes that are worth exploring. So first off, the premises.
The future. The polar ice caps have melted, covering the Earth with water. Those who survived have adapted to a new world.
So that was the introductory scene of the movie, but with it comes one of the minor inconsistencies that I mentioned at the beginning. You see, it is in fact a scientific impossibility for the whole and the entirety of the planet to be covered in water if the ice caps were in fact to melt. Undoubtedly, it would be catastrophic, it would be a disastrous scenario, but not to the extent the movie portrays it to be. However, in this particular case, let us just use a greater degree of suspension of disbelief and pretty much just roll with it. Now, the world that is constructed is one similar to many other dystopias that have been portrayed and represented during those years. You see, and even prior actually, let us think for instance about Joseph Ballard and his tetralogy of elements. We're speaking about the 60s. Then the 70s, you would have, for instance, Frank Herbert's Dune. And that is just in literature. In movies, you could think, for instance, of Mad Max and the trilogy of movies of Mad Max. Now, there are many even more examples, and we could start discussing them, but I don't think that they are worthwhile mentioning because we would just go off track. The reason that I mentioned, however, Dune and Mad Max in particular, are because several parallelisms that might be useful when considering Waterworld. You see, while it is true that the setting of these two, the Dune being the books and Mad Max being movies, their setting depicts an ocean that is made out of sand, a barren ocean at that. But the social dimensions of their dystopian worlds bears some resemblance to the one created in Waterworld. So finally, we could start talking about the movie itself. It was directed by Kevin Reynolds, stars Kevin Costner and Dennis Hopper, and I did say that it was a box office flop. But you have to consider this. From a cinematographical point of view, much of the budget, a big part of the budget, was given to the sets themselves. There was no CGI in those days, well, not one that would rival the one that we have today. So the attention and care that was given to the sets, actually shows. The movie eventually received somewhat of a cult following, to the point that fans even made a cut that now is mainstream. It is called the Ulysses cut. And it does add about half an hour worth of content, but those extra scenes do add to that dimension of themes that the movie portrays. So we have seen in the premise that the world at this point is pretty much entirely covered in water. Time has passed, but that time is unspecified. We as viewers have this perception that the time span might be that of at least several generations. People do not remember the earth they lived on, they do not remember land, and as such, soil and earth become almost mythicized. In this world, the monetary system is based on bartering, so the most valuable possessions that one may have are in fact soil, the little soil that remains available, paper, which deteriorates easily, fresh water, because they are, however, surrounded by salt water, and even the relics of the past world, small, minute artifacts. From a linguistic point of view, although the movie does not explore it too much, there is a reference of somewhat, I would say, of linguistic evolution. A language that is referenced is Portuguese, so a mixture between Greek and Portuguese, and Hindi seems more common, but the movie does not put too much emphasis on this. From a linguistic point of view, however, what I will say is that they create another minor inconsistency, because from a certain point you have one or two characters that from time to time swear and say something like, for instance, Christ Almighty, but that clashes with a dimension of a mythicized past or a mythicized language, because for instance they say, I swear on Poseidon, or just one character says, I swear on Poseidon, but that implies a different historical dimension, which in my opinion just clashes that with the fact that, for instance, someone else refers to the fact that the reason that they are living within this water world is because the ancient gods have done something terrible to the humans hundreds of years ago. So possibly the movie tries to explore this or to construct a mythical dimension of the past, but let's just say that that stylistically doesn't add up. Moving on, however, the people within this world, they live in formations, let's just say that they live in tribes, on these floating villages which they call atolls. According to the dictionary, that is a small group of islands, which is an interesting comparison, an interesting linguistic thing that they did. So they are grouped together because of fear. They fear the raiders, and in this case, the raiders are referred to as smokers and are presented as pirates and bandits. They are the antithetical force that governs this world. They are the quote-unquote bad guys. Now, the reason that they are called smokers, let's just say that there are two reasons. They are covered in soot and grease, they are very dirty, but their ship, they have a very big ship that they drive with smaller ones that just attach to it. And that ship produces a lot of smoke, so when they arrive, they are seen from very far away. And also, they smoke a lot of cigarettes, which again is a bit of a problem within this world. You see, that is another of the inconsistencies of Waterworld. They have, the smoker faction, have a lot of cigarettes from the old world, but tobacco being a limited resource in this world and a lot of time has passed, it is never explained why they still have so many cigarettes. But let's just call that a flavor thing. Now the smokers are navigating in this very rusty version of the Exxon Valdez, which is a ship that really existed, and the ship that in 1989 spilled thousands of barrels of crude oil in Alaska. So again, the movie trying to add these layers of dimension. Now, the smokers' supply of what they refer to as goat juice, so in this case, the fuel that they use to power up the ship, is limited. And the leader of the smokers knows this very well. That is why he is in search of the MacGuffin of this movie, which is a map that would lead him to dry land. And we will get back to the MacGuffin briefly. Another interesting comparison that I want to, however, to emphasize is that the leader of the smokers has a very similar behavior to the one in Mad Max, and also the society, quote-unquote society, of the smokers is a hierarchy based on force. So again, you have these themes within the dystopia that is survival of the fittest. So, about dryland, Waterworld creates this myth of a place that is still land. And that is very important because within this myth, there is also a map that leads to that land. Now, this is obviously MacGuffin, and the map itself is tattooed on the back of a little girl. It is never explained why, or at least the explanation is a bit vague and is left to interpretation. But in the end, the main character, the positive characters, eventually reach the land. This would be a bit of a spoiler, but again, the movie is pretty old, and that is a pretty evident conclusion to a movie such as this. However, I would suggest to use again that suspension of disbelief, not to concentrate on the plot points themselves, but rather to try to understand the core themes that the movie presents, which are, in my opinion, much more important. So the main protagonist of this movie is called the Mariner, which at the end of the movie, in the Ulysses cut, he will be properly and accordingly named Ulysses, which that adds some symbolism to it. However, the movie starts with a controversial scene featuring himself, where he distills his own urine and then drinks the fresh water that comes out of that distillation process. Do you remember when I referenced Dune and the important comparison with it? Well, you see on the planet of Arrakis that is featured in Dune, the freemen, so the people that inhabit that world, have a special suit which also distills their own bodily fluids, sweat and urine. Because for the freemen that live on a planet that is entirely covered up in sand, humidity is a problem. They do not have water. So they use whatever means necessary to create that water. And this is a perfect analogy with what also Waterworld emphasizes, the fact that fresh water is a central resource, especially for survivability of humankind. Now, there are three great reveals within Waterworld. The first one comes at the beginning, I would say the first 20-ish minutes of screen time, and it features the main character, the Mariner, as being different from all the others. He is in fact a mutant. He is not well accepted by the others when they discover it. He has gills behind his ears, and also his feet are webbed, so he is capable of swimming better and faster. And you would understand how in a world made entirely out of water, this can be an asset. But again, according to the dystopian rules, society just ostracizes him. He is alienated by his own being a mutant and also his own being, let's just say, an evolutionary step in a different direction. You have another important reveal towards the end of the movie where the characters finally reach the dry land, the destination, but you have this reveal within the Ulysses cut, for you see there you discover that the dry land that they eventually reach is actually the peak of the Himalayas, which is now just a seemingly medium-sized island, not more than a peak, and it is, yes, green, there are some horses even there, but that implies that the whole rest of the world is underwater, which we already knew, but it just gives an introspection on the global dimension of how disastrous and catastrophical the situation was. The final reveal, which is right in the middle of the movie, for a society that thinks that there is nothing on their world except for water, I want to share with you the scene that depicts what lies underneath. What lies under in the depths of the water that we see. This scene is important for various reasons that slowly create and points towards the conclusion of various points that I'm trying to make. In a world where the past has been almost completely forgotten, the true essence of what is being sought and cherished lies actually under the character's feet. In a world that has been engulfed by water, the soil, the paper, and all the relics of the past that everyone are searching for still exist. They are the remnants of a past that has been forgotten, yes, but they have not disappeared. They are under the surface, submerged and static. The underwater city that you have just seen, just like many others within Waterworld, are fragments of a past that, because of an unthinkable ecological disaster, have been forgotten. The irony is that the only one who is able to see these fragments is one that is marginalized because of his mutations. The mariner, in fact, is called a fluke of evolution. He is alienated, and yet he is the only one who knows the truth, the only one capable of probing the depths of the world as well as the depths of the past and uncovering the truth. The sunken cities become hence a symbolism. As Donald Worcester said, and I quote, "Although the science fiction in Waterworld is mostly fictional, the film does give us a provocative metaphor for the world we may be creating. In the future, all that is solid may indeed vanish, and, in self-defense, we may be forced to reinvent almost everything: laws, politics, and political boundaries, settlements, food and energy sources, even the sense of history. And all of these things could be changed in order for survival." Now, the solidity that Worcester infers is not limited to the shift from land to water as in Waterworld, but it obviously implies a lack in certainties, a lack in values, a crisis of sorts that I think the current world is reflecting rather well. So at this point, the depiction of Waterworld becomes more astute, more symbolic, and of greater interest. There is still land, there still are certainties, there still is hope, but we just are unable to see them because we are overwhelmed by everything that lies above the surface. While the movie suggests that what lies beneath is in decay and a remnant of the past, that it is inaccessible, I propose to see something else, something more. I propose to look at the remnants of the city that the mariner sees. I propose to see in them the presence of something that will not vanish that easily, something that will endure, the presence of a society that, although is changing, will always have a core value that will be found under the surface, something that will be everlasting. Once again, I thank you for being here and thank you for listening to my presentation. Have a nice one.